Eleanor Whitmore stood at the edge of the sprawling backyard garden she once cultivated by hand, staring blankly at a white event tent being assembled near the roses. Her late husband Daniel had been gone 6 months. In that time, the Whitmore estate, once full of noise, grandchildren, and the comforting chaos of family, had gone eerily silent. No one had told her there was a wedding happening here this weekend. She watched as strangers in black polos unpacked crates of wine glasses and string lights. A sleek catering van idled near the garage. Her hands trembled as she walked inside to find Jason, her eldest son, on the phone in Daniel's old office. Her old office, really. "Whose wedding?" she asked, interrupting his call. Jason barely looked up. "It's just Alex and Brent, nothing big. They're handling most of it." Alex, her grandson. Eleanor blinked. The last time she'd spoken to him, he had promised to visit soon. "In our home?" she whispered. Jason sighed, ending the call. "Mom, it's not like you were using the space. Alex needed somewhere tasteful. Brent's family is flying in from Paris." Eleanor didn't remember giving permission. In fact, she didn't even remember being asked. That night, Eleanor searched the mail for an invitation. Anything. There was nothing. Her name wasn't on the guest list. The next morning, she opened the armoire in the guest bedroom to pull out her mother's wedding pearls, the ones she'd promised to wear to every grandchild's ceremony. The box was gone. The drawer beside it was empty, too. She checked the linen closet. Half the monogrammed towels were missing. Jason's wife Michelle caught her rifling through the hallway drawers and offered a brittle smile. "We've been doing a little decluttering. It's what you always said you'd do eventually, remember?" But Eleanor didn't remember saying that at all. It was little things at first. A painting she loved went missing. The housekeeper, now hired by Jason, moved out her favorite armchair. Eleanor's key no longer worked in the wine cellar door. Then came the harder blows. At her local bank, she was told her personal checking account had been, quote, consolidated for ease of management. Her card was declined when she tried to buy groceries. When she called to ask what was going on, she was told everything was handled under Jason's legal power of attorney, something she vaguely remembered signing when Daniel was dying. Just in case, Jason had said back then. Now it was being used to unmake her life. She cornered Jason in the kitchen one evening, holding the bank statement like a weapon. "You emptied my accounts," she said. Jason didn't even flinch. "They weren't just yours, Mom. Everything Dad had is part of the trust now. We're protecting the family's future." "From me?" Eleanor asked, her voice cracking. Jason gave her a long look, then turned away. "You're grieving. You'll understand eventually." Eleanor started to take long walks. Anything to stay out of the house that was no longer hers. One afternoon, she came home to find her bedroom furniture gone. All of it. In its place was a sleek white yoga studio setup, complete with Himalayan salt lamps and floor-to-ceiling mirrors. Serena, her daughter, stood in the middle of the room, stretching on a mat. "Mom, you were talking about simplifying, remember? This space wasn't really serving you." Eleanor's hands balled into fists. "This was my room!" Serena didn't even pause. "Not officially. The trust includes a property transition clause. Jason didn't tell you?" Eleanor packed a small suitcase and went to her friend Marianne's house for the night. When she returned the next day, the front gate wouldn't open. Her access code had been changed. She called Jason. "This is ridiculous," she said. "Let me in." Jason's voice was calm. "Mom, we've all talked and maybe a little time away is what's best. For everyone." "Everyone?" "You're not yourself lately. You're accusing us of things, lashing out. It's not healthy. Michelle says it's borderline paranoia." "I want to speak to my grandchildren," she said. "They're busy with the wedding." Eleanor's voice dropped. "You've locked me out of my own home." "It's not your home anymore, Mom. It was always meant to pass to the next generation. Dad said that. But not like this." There was silence. Then, "We'll send someone to collect the rest of your things." The line went dead. Eleanor stood outside the gate as evening fell, her small suitcase beside her, watching the lights twinkle in the house that used to be hers. Her phone buzzed. An automated text. "Your estate key code has been updated." If you believe this is an error, contact legal@whitmoretrust.org. She stared at the message for a long time before turning and walking down the hill. Past the hydrangeas she planted the year Serena was born. Past the tree Jason once fell from as a boy. Past the home she built with every fiber of her youth. It had taken months, but her family had succeeded in making her a ghost. And the worst part? They did it with smiles on their faces. The shelter was tucked behind a shuttered laundromat, its painted sign weathered to near illegibility. Eleanor Whitmore had never been in this part of town before, let alone carrying everything she owned in a single duffel bag. The woman who once hosted galas and garden parties was now asking for a cot in a dormitory shared with 6 other displaced women, one of whom offered her a half-used bar of soap, like a peace offering. "This ain't rock bottom," the woman said with a raspy chuckle, "but it's the lobby." The staff assigned Eleanor a narrow bunk, handed her a pair of secondhand pajamas, and asked if she had dietary restrictions. She answered mechanically, not yet processing what had just happened. Her son had locked her out, her daughter had converted her bedroom into a wellness studio. Her finances were beyond her reach, and no one, not even her grandchildren, had answered her calls. Still, she clung to denial. They were grieving too, she reasoned. Maybe they were overwhelmed. Maybe Jason had simply made a legal mistake he didn't know how to reverse. Maybe Serena didn't realize how much she'd hurt her. She convinced herself of this fiction, until she saw Serena in person. It happened by accident. One of the shelter volunteers had arranged for donated clothes to be distributed at a high-profile fundraising gala at the Riverview Hotel. Eleanor, unrecognizable in a second-hand dress and borrowed heels, tagged along under the pretense of helping. She spotted Serena on stage, resplendent in emerald satin, clutching a microphone and addressing the crowd of donors. "And, of course," Serena said with a saccharine smile, "we all have stories of family hardship. I myself had to make difficult choices with my own mother, who sadly suffers from a decline in judgment. But boundaries are love, right?" Laughter echoed. Eleanor went cold. Later, she trailed Serena toward the private bar. Just before slipping into the VIP lounge, Serena turned to a group of guests and said, "Honestly, I did her a favor. She was emotionally manipulative, always needing to be the martyr. This way, she gets to be the tragic heroine she always wanted to be." Eleanor didn't cry. She walked out into the alley and vomited into a storm drain. That night, she didn't speak a word to the women in the shelter. She simply sat at the end of her bunk, clutching a cracked porcelain teacup someone had left on the donation shelf. Its handle was missing. She ran her thumb over the broken edge like a rosary bead. Then someone whispered behind her, "Don't take it personally. They always make us sound crazy when they want our things." The voice belonged to a petite woman named Maura, with eyes far too sharp for her soft demeanor. Over weak tea and stale cookies, Eleanor learned Maura's story, then Lily's, then Petra's. Each woman had a different background, different career, different life, but the pattern was hauntingly familiar. Estranged adult children, sudden financial freezes, medical incompetence diagnoses that came out of nowhere. "It's like a playbook," Maura said. "A script they all read from. One day you're mom, the next day you're an unstable old woman who needs, quote, supervised care." They called it the Quiet Cull, a whispered phrase passed between women in shelters, hospices, and halfway homes, a phrase spoken with bitterness and awe. A phrase Eleanor had never heard before, and instantly believed. A few nights later, Eleanor returned from a job center visit to find an envelope tucked under her pillow. Her name written in her husband's familiar hand. The paper was yellowed with time, the ink slightly smudged. 3 words written across the front. "Only open if betrayed." Her hands shook. She stared at it for a long time, unsure whether to open it or burn it. After all, Daniel was dead. He'd been gone for 6 months. The Daniel she remembered would never have left her to be humiliated like this. But the Daniel she didn't know, the one who kept secrets and changed wills and whispered to lawyers without her, might have. She opened it, Inside were instructions. Not just a letter, but a map of sorts. A key to a safety deposit box at a private bank in Greystone. A passcode only she would understand. Her wedding date reversed. The note ended with one chilling line. If they've turned you into a ghost, you'll need the truth to haunt them. Eleanor folded the note, slipped it into the inside pocket of her thrift store coat, and lay down on her cot, eyes wide open in the dark. The Quiet Cull was real. Her husband had known, and whatever was in that box, it had waited just long enough. She wasn't grieving anymore, she was remembering. The bank was discreet, old money quiet, and hidden behind a marble facade that Eleanor had passed hundreds of times but never entered. Greystone and Holloway catered to the ultra-wealthy, the kind of place where the receptionist spoke in hushed tones and the carpet swallowed your footsteps. They didn't ask too many questions, not even when a tired woman in borrowed slacks and scuffed shoes handed over a faded envelope bearing her late husband's name. The manager, after inspecting the key and verifying the credentials Daniel had so meticulously prepared, escorted Eleanor downstairs to a private vault room. The lock clicked open with a heavy thunk. Inside was a slim safety deposit box, smaller than she expected. The manager left her alone with it. Eleanor opened the lid and felt the chill of truth settle in her bones. Inside were 3 items: a leather-bound journal, a thick manila envelope, and a tiny black USB drive. No jewelry, no cash, just secrets. She started with the envelope. Dozens of documents spilled out. Copies of financial transactions, property deeds, and, most alarmingly, a recent version of Daniel's will. She blinked at the signature, dated just 3 weeks before his death. The terms were radically different than the one they had discussed together months prior. In this version, Jason had full control over the trust, Serena received the family estate outright, and Eleanor, a modest monthly stipend contingent on her sound mental health. There was a clause allowing her disbursements to be suspended at her children's discretion. Her hands trembled. The next document chilled her further. A letter addressed to a lawyer she didn't recognize, thanking them for helping ensure the transition goes smoothly should I pass unexpectedly. Should I pass unexpectedly? He'd been afraid. The journal was filled with Daniel's slanted cursive, entries dating back over a year. It began innocuously, reflections on aging, mortality, pride in his children, but as the months progressed, the tone darkened. He wrote about memory lapses, hallucinations, a creeping paranoia, but he didn't believe it was natural. Serena insists I'm overworked. Jason brought in that new doctor, drive roads. But I'm not crazy. I remember what I signed. Now suddenly, I can't recall names. I get dizzy after my tea. I'm being watched. My study was rearranged, drawers unlocked. I confronted Jason. He said I was getting confused again. I'm not confused. I'm scared. If anything happens to me, it wasn't my heart. It wasn't time. I need Eleanor to know this isn't who I was. Eleanor couldn't breathe. She scrolled through the entries, the final one short, panicked, jagged. She knows, Serena knows I plan to undo the changes. I heard her and Jason arguing about protecting what's owed. If I die, Eleanor must look at the toxicology. Look at the will, protect herself. On the last page, tucked into the crease, was a receipt, proof Daniel had booked an independent consultation with another physician the week he died. He never made the appointment. Eleanor took the USB drive to the shelter's old computer lab, booted up a dusty terminal, and waited. It contained audio files, secret recordings. In one, Jason's voice filtered through, angry and low. If she finds out the changes weren't permanent, this all falls apart. We did this for her comfort, remember? She was never capable of running things. Serena replied, colder. She raised us for obligation, not love. Let's not pretend she didn't bring this on herself. Another recording, dated 2 days before Daniel's death, caught Serena whispering on a call. If he changes it back, I get nothing. Do you understand what that means? I have debts. That word, debts, stabbed Eleanor with a memory. The mysterious bank withdrawals Daniel had asked her about 6 months ago. The ones he said must have been accounting errors. They weren't. She realized with a sick twist in her gut that the truth wasn't just about her betrayal, it was about Daniel's murder. And Serena had more than enough motive to ensure the will stayed in its final, fraudulent form. But Eleanor didn't weep. She sat at the computer long after the screen dimmed, the weight of the box's contents pressing down like judgment. The daughter she loved had been calculating her replacement. Her son had doctored her legal status. Her husband, in his final days, had realized he was being undone from within and still tried to protect her. He left breadcrumbs. She now had the map. She made a decision then. No more waiting, no more hoping for apologies or reconciliation. The woman they erased was gone. But the woman they feared? The one with the evidence, the fire, the fury? She was just beginning to rise, and next time her children saw her name, it wouldn't be on a forgotten invitation. It would be on a subpoena. Eleanor stood outside the Whitmore Foundation gala, watching a glossy black invitation flutter from her hand to the pavement. She hadn't been invited, of course, but she had come anyway, wearing borrowed pearls and the same navy dress Serena once mocked as too plain for high society. Let them stare. Inside, cameras flashed over the rich and the ruthless. Eleanor walked past them, chin high, slipping through the crowd like a ghost returning to haunt its own house. She knew this world. She helped build it. Fundraisers, silent auctions, legacy dinners. Every canapé passed on a silver tray had once been bought with the sacrifices she made. Tonight, she'd reclaim her place. Not through sentiment, but strategy. Her first strike came in silence. In the main exhibit hall, a large oil portrait had been unveiled weeks ago, a commission Serena had bragged about, calling it a tribute to the legacy of the Whitmore family. Eleanor had arranged a quiet replacement through an old art school friend. Now, staring back at the crowd was not Serena in her pearl-draped prime, but a family portrait from 20 years ago, Eleanor at its center, her hand resting on Jason's shoulder. A young Serena leaning reluctantly against her mother's hip. The plaque beneath read, Matriarch and Maker, Eleanor Whitmore, Architect of a Dynasty. The room stilled. Serena turned ashen. Jason, on the far end of the ballroom, downed a glass of scotch in one gulp. They had underestimated her. Later that night, Eleanor approached Jason's office building under cover of dusk. She slipped a simple envelope under his mahogany door. Inside, a printed spreadsheet of bank transactions. One column highlighted, the family trust. Withdrawals Jason claimed were for quote, tax structuring. They were funneled through a shell company registered in Panama, one Eleanor had discovered through a name Daniel scribbled in the margins of his journal. The note inside read, You stole my life, I want it back. E. By morning, Jason's private phone was ringing nonstop. Lawyers, accountants, a trustee demanding clarification. Eleanor had contacted the one board member loyal to Daniel, implying she'd be taking a more active interest in family holdings. It was enough to send ripples through the carefully maintained web of deception. Meanwhile, Eleanor continued to reconstruct her legal identity. She visited a retired notary who remembered her signature. She acquired a sworn statement from her former physician verifying her mental fitness. She even tracked down the wedding officiant who had signed her and Daniel's original marriage license, still alive and happy to help. You raised this empire, the woman said, hands trembling as she handed Eleanor a copy of the notarized affidavit. Don't let them shut you out of it. Eleanor didn't intend to. Her reappearance sparked panic. Serena began canceling public events due to exhaustion. Jason hired a PR firm to manage unfounded rumors circulating about the family trust. Eleanor let them sweat. Then she dropped another bombshell. A podcast episode aired under the title, The Ghost Mother, One Woman's Battle to Reclaim Her Life. It never mentioned Eleanor by name, but the story was unmistakable. The betrayal. The will. The Quiet Cull. It was raw, emotional, and damning. Within 48 hours, it hit 300,000 downloads. A prominent journalist began investigating the alarming legal gray zones that allowed adult children to use power of attorney against aging parents. Social media buzzed. Hashtags like #JusticeForMothers and #Quiet Cull began trending. And then Eleanor received a call from Jason. "Mother," he began, brittle and cautious. "What exactly do you want?" She smiled quietly, even as her heart thundered. "I want the truth out, Jason. I want you both to stop pretending I disappeared on accident. And I want my life back, or I'll take yours, legally, publicly, and piece by piece." A pause. "You don't know what you're doing," he warned. "Oh, darling," Eleanor replied. "You don't know what I already have." The next day, she received a warning, a brick through the shelter's window. No note, no fingerprints. But Eleanor knew it wasn't meant to scare her. It was meant to silence her. Instead, it steeled her resolve. She returned to her room at the shelter, where the other women waited with cautious hope. Over tea, Eleanor began to tell them what she had discovered in the journal, the USB, the doctored will. "It's not just happening to me," she said. "It's happening to all of us." Together, they began planning their next move, not just for Eleanor's justice, but for every discarded mother in the shadows of wealth and ambition. What began as a quiet erasure was becoming a public reckoning. And the woman they'd underestimated was now the most dangerous kind, one with nothing left to lose, and everything still worth fighting for. Eleanor sat in the corner of the shelter's common room, a notebook open on her lap. Around her, the other women murmured stories over chipped mugs of lukewarm tea. Each tale carried the same bitter spine: adult children seizing control, financial disappearances, subtle banishments disguised as what's best. One woman, Lenora, had been locked out of her home after her daughter changed the deed. Another, soft-spoken Beverly, whispered about the day her grandson had escorted her to a, quote, doctor's appointment that ended with her in an assisted living facility with no legal recourse to leave. It wasn't coincidence, it was a blueprint. A pattern was emerging, carefully orchestrated, eerily similar across state lines. Each woman's downfall was paved with glossy paperwork, sealed court approvals, and smiling betrayals. They called it, quietly, the Quiet Cull. At first, Eleanor had thought it nothing more than a poetic term born of shared trauma. But then she found the USB drive tucked inside her late husband's journal, wedged behind a false panel Eleanor hadn't noticed before. On it, spreadsheets, names, case files. A PowerPoint presentation labeled The Cull Protocol, Tier 1 Targets. It wasn't a metaphor. It was a system. Wealthy heirs, elite attorneys, medical professionals, an entire underworld of privilege working to quietly retire inconvenient parents and redirect estates. Before probate, before resistance. It was organized, sanitized, profitable, and worst of all, it was growing. Eleanor and her shelter allies began compiling their own counterfile. They called it the living record. Testimonies, signed affidavits, screenshots of emails, audio clips, like the one of Serena at a private brunch, chuckling that some women just don't know when to step down. Then came the first warning. Lenora vanished. She'd gone to confront her son with a folder of documents Eleanor had helped compile. She didn't come back. Her phone went dark. Her belongings were gone from the shelter by morning. The police called it a, quote, voluntary relocation. But Eleanor knew the language of erasure all too well by now. The danger was real. Still, Eleanor pressed forward. She emailed an encrypted file to a well-known investigative journalist under the pseudonym Mother Zero. She used a burner phone to arrange a meeting with a former Whitmore financial advisor, one Daniel had fired years ago for integrity issues, but who now seemed eager to settle old scores. "I was told to sign over those trust reallocations," he admitted, sipping espresso in a corner cafe. But I never understood why they were moving your annuities into Serena's holdings before Daniel even passed. Eleanor's hand tightened around her cup. You're saying they started this before he died? The man nodded grimly. It was a setup. Months in the making. He got sick at the wrong time, or maybe exactly when they needed him to. Back at the shelter, Serena's carefully curated world began to fracture. A gossip site leaked an anonymous tip that Eleanor Whitmore had paid a surrogate under the table to cover up a decades-old adoption. The story hinted that Serena had once given up a baby in secret, then fabricated a story of infertility to gain sympathy and social standing. The fallout was swift. Sponsorships paused. Speaking engagements canceled. A luxury brand ambassador deal was terminated, pending ethics review. Serena, ever poised, held a press conference. But Eleanor watched on the shelter's grainy television as her daughter cracked, live. This woman is destroying my life, Serena cried. She's not a victim, she's a saboteur. A reporter leaned in. Do you mean your mother, Ms. Whitmore? Serena hesitated. Her eyes flickered, then hardened. She used to be. But that woman? She died a long time ago. The shelter erupted in shocked silence. Eleanor stood slowly, turned off the TV, and said, Good. Because the woman she was would have forgiven you. Later that night, Eleanor found a new envelope tucked into her shelter room door. No return address. Inside, a newspaper clipping about Daniel's death. Circled in red ink were the coroner's name and the time of death, neither of which matched the official certificate Eleanor had found earlier. Beneath it, a single line was scrawled in block letters. If you keep digging, you'll join him. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. But Eleanor didn't flinch. She went to the shelter's small common area and laid everything out on the table. Documents, photos, USBs. She looked at the women surrounding her, some hopeful, some terrified. I'm not asking you to fight, she said, but I am. A pause. Then Beverly, voice barely audible, said, We'll help you. If not for ourselves, then for the daughters we thought we were raising right. Together, they prepared their next move. Not in anger, but in calculation. This wasn't just Eleanor's story anymore. It was a reckoning long overdue. Eleanor sat at the worn kitchen table of the shelter, staring at the small envelope she'd just pulled from her bag. It was yellowed with age, edges frayed, and addressed in her late husband Daniel's meticulous handwriting. Inside was a single piece of paper, a faded paternity test result, something Daniel had clearly hidden from everyone. Her breath caught. Jason wasn't Daniel's son. Her hands trembled as she reread the lines, numbers and percentages. The man she had loved, lived with, built a family around, had kept this secret buried in a safe for decades. Eleanor's world fractured all over again, not from the children who had betrayed her, but from the man she'd trusted more than anyone. Questions swarmed her mind like a tempest. Had Daniel ever loved Jason? Or had Jason been a pawn in a darker game? And what about Serena? Had she known? Had she used this secret like a weapon? Her instincts screamed for answers. The following morning, Eleanor arranged a tense, guarded meeting with Jason at a neutral cafe. The place was crowded, bustling with life, a stark contrast to the cold distance between them. She slid the paper across the table without a word. Jason's face darkened immediately. You think I don't know? He snapped. Do you think I didn't grow up with this hanging over my head like a curse? He leaned forward, voice low and bitter. My real father wanted nothing to do with me. Daniel took me in, raised me. But I was always the outsider. You trapped me in a lie and expected gratitude. Eleanor's throat tightened. Jason, I never knew. I never wanted you to feel that way. But I did. And that's why I did what I did. You weren't the only one fighting to survive in that family. Jason's confession was a jagged shard of truth that both hurt and explained the fracture that had opened between them. As Jason stormed out, Eleanor sat alone with a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Grief for the man she lost, shame for secrets kept, and a fierce resolve to uncover the full story. Then came the public meltdown. Serena, already teetering on the edge from the adoption scandal, was cornered by a relentless tabloid crew outside a charity gala. Cameras flashed as she snapped, her usual poise crumbling like brittle glass. "This woman, my mother, is destroying everything we built," Serena screamed, voice shaking. "She's a vengeful ghost, haunting our lives with lies and bitterness." The video went viral. Social media erupted with heated debates. #family secrets, #Whitmore fallout, polarizing public opinion and dragging Eleanor's private pain into the unforgiving spotlight. But Eleanor hadn't dropped her biggest bombshell yet. Behind closed doors, she held another secret from the safe deposit box, a letter from Daniel to a mysterious M. The letter spoke of blackmail, threats, and a deal Daniel regretted making. He feared that revealing the truth about Jason's paternity would destroy the family legacy. Worse, he hinted someone close was orchestrating his downfall. Eleanor's fingers traced the ink as a chilling realization sank in. Daniel hadn't been the innocent victim. He was trapped in his own web of lies. That night, Eleanor called Serena. When the line clicked alive, she heard only silence. Then, finally, "Why are you doing this to us?" Serena whispered, voice raw. "Because the truth deserves to live," Eleanor replied softly. "And because I deserve to know who really killed the man I loved." Before hanging up, Eleanor made one last demand: a family meeting. It was a desperate gamble. At the appointed hour, in the cramped conference room of a downtown law office, the fractured Whitmore family gathered, Jason cold and guarded, Serena defiant but trembling, and Eleanor steady and resolute. Eleanor laid out the paternity test, the blackmail letter, and the inconsistencies in Daniel's death certificate she'd discovered. "You all have lived in the shadow of secrets," she said, "but the truth will not stay buried." The room exploded. Jason shouted accusations of betrayal. Serena cried that Eleanor was trying to destroy them all. But Eleanor stood firm. Then, in a moment no one expected, a new voice broke through. The family lawyer, a man long considered a neutral party, cleared his throat. "I have something to add," he said, eyes flicking nervously between them. Daniel was being blackmailed by someone in this room. Someone who feared losing their inheritance. The air thickened. "You," he said, pointing to Serena, "had the most to lose and the most to gain." Serena's face drained of color. Eleanor's heart pounded. The lawyer's confession was a dagger aimed at the family's fragile facade. Suddenly, everything Eleanor thought she knew about betrayal, loyalty, and blood ties shifted. And the greatest betrayal, the one that shattered the Whitmore dynasty, was yet to fully unfold. Eleanor stood outside the county records office, the manila envelope in her hands heavier than it had any right to be. Inside was the final certified copy of Daniel Whitmore's death certificate, along with the full coroner's report she'd requested under her newly reinstated legal identity. She stepped into a quiet corner of the building's atrium and slid the contents onto a bench. There it was. Official cause of death: myocardial infarction, a heart attack. But the toxicology panel was incomplete. There were traces of digitalis, a cardiac glycoside typically used for heart failure, but Daniel had never been prescribed it. Even worse, the time of death had been recorded as 2:17 a.m., while Eleanor remembered clearly that she'd spoken to him on the phone at 3:45 a.m. that same night. She flipped to the signature. The attending physician's name was Dr. Lionel Kessler. She blinked. The name meant nothing. Eleanor typed it into a public registry. No such doctor existed. Her stomach dropped. Someone had fabricated part of Daniel's medical report, and by extension, helped cover up his murder. She left the building in a daze and called the only person who might give her a clue: Brenda, a longtime former employee of the Whitmore family firm and Daniel's old executive assistant. Brenda hesitated but finally agreed to meet, on the condition they speak off the record and in private. They met in a parking garage beneath an abandoned shopping complex. Brenda was older now, grayer, with eyes that darted around like she expected to be followed. "Daniel told me the day before he died that he was about to rewrite the will," she said. "He was planning to give you power of attorney. He said he'd seen something in Jason's financial records that made him sick to his stomach. Eleanor nodded slowly. And then he died hours later. Brenda looked haunted. He didn't just die, he was silenced. Serena was furious when she found out Daniel was thinking of cutting her out completely. She said, "He'll do what's best for the legacy, one way or another. I thought it was just posturing, but now I'm not sure." Eleanor's mind raced. That was motive. But the means. Who had access to medication Daniel wasn't prescribed? She thought back. Serena's ex-fiancé was a pharmaceutical rep. The same man who once bragged about knowing how to bypass hospital red tape to help clients get what they needed. She dismissed it at the time. Not anymore. Eleanor pulled up Serena's public appearances from the week of Daniel's death. There it was. 2 days before his heart stopped, Serena had been at a gala fundraiser for a private eldercare network. The sponsor? The same pharmaceutical company her ex worked for. Coincidence? Or procurement? It was time for answers. Eleanor arranged a private meeting with the family's long-serving legal advisor, Malcolm Yates, a man known for his loyalty, discretion, and unfortunately his long friendship with both Jason and Serena. She confronted him in his sleek office, laying the coroner's report and the fake physician ID on the table. Malcolm stared at it, his expression unreadable. Then he stood, walked to the minibar, poured himself a whiskey, and drank it in one swallow. "You were never supposed to see this," he said quietly. "Daniel trusted me. But in the end, Serena came to me. She said he was unraveling. That he wanted to tear everything down, give it all to you, even hand control of the foundation over to those, he caught himself, women in your shelter. She said she was protecting the family legacy. I helped make sure the death was recorded cleanly. No scandal, no press." Eleanor's voice cracked. "So you lied on a death certificate." "I didn't sign it," Malcolm said. "She did." Eleanor froze. "Serena?" "No. The doctor who signed it. He was real. Once. But he died in 2017. Serena forged the signature using old medical documents." Eleanor felt bile rise in her throat. "And Jason?" Malcolm's lips tightened. "He came in after. He cleaned the finances, laid the groundwork to remove you. He said it was a family decision." Eleanor stood in stunned silence, the gravity of the betrayal consuming her. They hadn't just stolen her house, her money, or her name. They'd helped erase her husband's final acts of conscience. They'd rewritten history to protect themselves, and now they were willing to go further to make sure she stayed silent. "Do you know what they're planning now?" she asked Malcolm. He hesitated. "They're considering a conservatorship hearing, claiming early dementia. If they succeed, you'll be institutionalized, legally voiceless." It was the final betrayal. A preemptive strike to lock her away, permanently. Eleanor walked out of Malcolm's office, feeling like a war widow, rearming herself. She clutched the falsified records, Daniel's hidden journal, and the testimony of her shelter sisters. There would be no more appeals for understanding. No more hope for reconciliation. Her children had written her off as expendable. Now she would show them what an erased woman looks like when she rewrites the ending. Eleanor stood in the echoing marble atrium of the Whitmore Foundation headquarters, a building she once helped to decorate when Daniel was just beginning his philanthropic ventures. Now cameras swiveled toward her, flashbulbs exploded, and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Every journalist in the city had answered her anonymous tip, "Come see the truth behind the Whitmore legacy. It's time the silence ended." She approached the podium in tailored charcoal gray, a small pin of Daniel's initials on her lapel. Behind her, projected on a massive screen, were images and documents, altered wills, audio clips of Jason threatening an accountant, medical records flagged with forgery alerts, and the faces of 10 other mothers. Forgotten women discarded in silence, just like her. "I was Eleanor Whitmore," she said calmly, her voice amplified across the hall. "But that name was stolen, just like everything else. Today, I take it back, not just for myself, but but for every woman whose story was rewritten by greed, convenience, and cruelty. In the audience, Serena's face turned ashen. She had been mid-fundraiser when the screen behind her suddenly flickered to life with Eleanor's live broadcast. The press abandoned Serena's event in droves, cameras turning to the real story, the Quiet Cull, the cover-up, and a mother's spectacular return. Serena didn't even see the two plainclothes detectives approach until they were beside her. "Serena Whitmore," one said, presenting a warrant. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, and obstruction of justice in connection with the suspicious death of Daniel Whitmore." The room erupted in chaos. Serena, defiant to the end, screamed over the noise. "You think you've won? You've killed your own family's future, Mother! You've ruined us!" Eleanor, watching the live feed from her own press conference, shook her head slowly. "No," she whispered, "you did that yourselves." Across town, Jason wasn't faring better. He had just arrived at his private office when every one of his business accounts was frozen by court order. Eleanor had filed a class action lawsuit against him and the family lawyer on behalf of herself and several other victims of the Quiet Cull. The IRS had already begun reviewing the trust fund withdrawals. His assistant handed him a letter, unmarked, hand-delivered. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single page. "You always said I was weak. But look at me now, Jason. You were so afraid of losing control that you destroyed the one person who ever truly protected you. I kept your secret, even when Daniel almost found out. Now the world will know what you really are. P.S. Check the portrait in the lobby. There's a wire behind it. Enjoy the recording." Pale, Jason rushed downstairs. The foundation lobby, now empty, displayed a massive oil painting of Eleanor and Daniel once used as a PR centerpiece. Behind it, concealed in the frame's wiring system, was a tiny digital recorder. Jason pressed play. Eleanor's voice echoed out, layered with his own. "Embezzlement transfer through Cayman. If she finds out it's over, she'll ruin me." It was a damning confession. And Eleanor had already delivered copies to the press, the FBI, and 3 major nonprofit boards. Back at the courthouse, Eleanor signed her last affidavit with a calm hand. The judge had reinstated her control over the estate and nullified all changes made to Daniel's will under duress. The funds were being redirected toward elder protection programs, women's housing initiatives, and the rebuilding of the shelter she once called home. But even in victory, there was no full celebration. As she stood outside the courtroom, wind tugging at her scarf, a reporter asked, "Mrs. Whitmore, how does it feel to finally get justice?" She didn't answer right away. "It feels," she started, then paused, "like burying someone twice. You grieve them once when they die, and again when you realize what they truly were." That night, Eleanor returned to the shelter, now renamed the Whitmore Haven, at the request of the women she'd saved. Inside, laughter echoed down the halls. Tea steeped on the stove. One of the women had painted a mural on the wall, a phoenix rising from a house of ashes. "Is it done?" asked Marlene, one of Eleanor's closest allies. "It's never done," Eleanor replied, setting her bag down. "But it's quieter now." She sat in the common room where it had all begun, homeless, heartbroken, stripped of everything. Now, she was surrounded by life. One woman passed her a photo, an old picture of Eleanor in her 30s, smiling with Daniel and the children on a beach. "Do you miss them?" the woman asked. Eleanor looked at the image for a long time. "I miss who I thought they were," she said softly, "but the person I was back then, she's gone. I've buried her too." She stood and addressed the room. "They took everything," she said with a small, resolute smile. "And still, I'm here." Outside, the streetlights flickered on. Inside, Eleanor Whitmore sat down to a meal with women who called her family, and for the first time in years, she felt whole.